Exclusive reporting from NBC News linking a Chinese spiritual group footing the bill for some of the biggest pro-Trump advertising on Facebook. The Epoch Times has spent more than $1.5 million on 11,000 pro-Trump advertisements in the last 6 months alone. Put that in perspective. That is more than any organization outside the Trump campaign itself, even more than most Democratic presidential candidates have spent on their own campaigns. Joining me now, the reporters who broke this extraordinary story, NBC's Ben Collins and Brandy Zarazny. I'm going to start with this. What?
Yeah, it's wild. I know, it's a very wild story, but here's the deal. So there's this group called Falun Gong, and they run this thing called the Epoch Times. If you are based on ad targeting, if you're over 50 on Facebook, you probably got one of these ads. In fact, you may have gotten them in the mail. They send out physical mailers talking about the deep state and talking about how Hillary Clinton is part of a cabal sort of taking over the government. They are, I would say, pretty much everywhere. And their end goal of the spiritual group is to bring about a judgment day that will pit communists and communists to hell and anyone who's sympathetic to them to heaven. And they think that Donald Trump is the guy helping bring that up.
What's interesting about this, too, is that in the age of Trump, you know, we have seen grifters pop up everywhere. So what's interesting about this is that it looks like
grifters with this kind of money?
Well, this is the thing. So it looks like a regular conservative outlet because it just keeps getting crazier and crazier, the regular conservative ecosystem. But when you look behind it, you see it's nonprofit. So the Falun Gong has several media arms. One is the Epoch Times, which is this. One is NDTV, which is their television production company, which they make tons of weird interviews and they do YouTube shows. And then the other is Shen Yun, which if you've ever been anywhere, you've seen these ubiquitous advertisements for a dance troupe that looks like a traditional. Yes, this is actually aligned with them as well. So that's their media arm, and they represent Epoch Times as the new conservative player on the block. But really, this is a decades-old media arm of a anti-Chinese government propaganda outlet.
What does Facebook have to say about this? Let's say we looked at a different industry. Let's say this was investment banking, and some foreign company that you didn't know calls up and says, yep, I want to do a massive transaction with you and pay you millions of dollars. The bank would have to say, we're going to do a deep investigation in know your client before I take your money. So Facebook?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And we've thought about this too. All of this dark money, we don't even know how they're getting the money, right? We investigated this for 5 months. We still don't really know where this money is coming from.
And what does Facebook say?
They don't have an answer to this sort of thing.
Facebook has the ad space. Like they really react to negative press. So if we say, look, this is a violation of your advertising policies, then Facebook will usually bat it down. Facebook has, if you look at their ad archive, they have batted down a lot of the Epoch Times advertisements. But generally, overall, they accept pretty much anybody who's willing to come to the table with money.
The shift began in 2016, and we're seeing it kick up again. Is it because of the election?
Oh, it's definitely because of the election. And this is not going to stop. This is when there are large political moments, they step up. In fact, after the Mueller report dropped, that week afterwards, they were a top 10 advertiser in all of Facebook. Not political advertiser, we're talking about advertiser. Like ExxonMobil was next to them in this list.
Is there any coordination or acknowledgement with Brad Parscale or President Trump's re-election campaign team?
I think, again, what we're finding is that the Trump campaign will align itself with whoever's willing to pay and put eyeballs on its message. So they have, Laura Trump had an interview, a 40-minute interview, the president's daughter-in-law, with one of the editors with the senior editor of the Epoch Times in Trump Tower recently. They were at CPAC interviewing everybody from Candace Owens to sitting congressmen. They are a big player on the block now, and nobody knows what's behind them.
Yeah, the president's Facebook page shared their content 6 times. Donald Trump Jr. shared them a couple times as well. So they are ingrained in that campaign. They're trying to ingratiate themselves into it. We'll see if that's actually what happens.
You spoke to former reporters there. What'd they tell you?
Well, so that was really interesting. So usually the people that are working there are just Falun Gong volunteers. So they're people that practice the religion or the spiritual movement, and they also work for the paper. That's part of their spirituality. They have to volunteer their time there. But in 2016, the Epoch Times did a really interesting thing, and they decided to hire from outside. So they brought in 7 new reporters that didn't practice. They put them in a locked room away from the rest of the newspaper staff, and they had them churn out articles. So one of the former reporters said that it was almost like a Russian troll farm. So that's what's happening behind the scenes here. I'm so curious about what their tactics